Haha! Look at this. Look at what we're doing. It's a new perspective. And I know that you probably can't handle this, because this is too much, because now we're actually in a standing position. Okay, you know things are getting serious whenever a reviewer is standing. Titanfall, let's rock.
Have I changed things? Still I fear the answer's no. In this fucked up world in which I feel I stand alone. All this hate that I feel for you, my one true enemy, once was blind, but now I see. It makes me question, why do we choose to live this way? I try to free my mind from what's not meant to be. It makes me question why.
Before I begin, I actually have a very serious question for everyone here. Why are gamers such ass clowns? It's a very serious question, and I'm not disincluding myself from that group of gamer ass clowns, because we all have this thing that we do, and it drives me crazy, even though I have done it before, because it's like a primal urge, and I don't understand it. Okay, let me try to explain this. The Thief review, remember that? Remember that thing I just did like a week ago? That review. I got a handful of people, not too many this time, but a handful of people that seem to believe that I am now their mortal nemesis because I enjoyed that game. My question then is, why do we do that? That thing right there. I don't understand why people have an issue when other people are having fun. Why is that a thing? Like, if you enjoy something, great. I mean, shouldn't matter as long as you're having fun with something. I mean, why does everyone feel the need to go around and destroy everyone else's fun just because they don't like something? And it's something I'm totally guilty of doing. I'm not like saying that, oh, this is you and not me. No, I've done this before. Because there was a pretty substantial period where I had this seething, deep, disconcerting hatred for Legend of Zelda: The Ocarina of Time. And because of this, anybody that liked the game, which is a lot of people, were now my mortal enemies. The reality of the situation is that we're all acting like idiots, and I don't understand why we do that. Like, you know, it's one thing to hate something, but it's another thing to try to, you know, tear down everyone else's, you know, fun. Like you can, you know, don't want to be a part of something, that's fine, but when you're being an ass about it, I think that should go over the line, and I think we all need to take a step back and stop that, like, now. Right now. Like, if this stops here, I think that is a good idea. It's not going to, but I think it's a good idea. That being said, what does this have to do with frickin' Titanfall? Well, because Titanfall was such a hyped up game, of course, there's this group of people that have decided that because this is popular, they must actively try to hate it. Even though they haven't actually played it. They must hate it though. Because hating something without having actually experienced it for yourself makes total goddamn sense. Of course. Among these people that seem to hate Titanfall so much without actually having played it are the people who hate Call of Duty without actually having played it. And the thing that annoys me about them is that the COD haters annoy me because I kind of like Call of Duty. Okay, I do. Most of them. I mean, there's a few games that are kind of but, you know, for the most part, they're quality FPSs, and I like playing them. I haven't played them since the first Black Ops, because I haven't had really the money to blow on them, because I'm not that big of a fan, but I think they're good games. And there's these group of people, a fairly large group of people, that keep bitching about COD. Like, I hate COD, COD sucks, blah, 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 blah. And then they go into this thing where they'll talk about, oh, all these COD fanboys drive me crazy, which is odd to me, because I have never run into a COD fanboy who was not actually an obvious troll. I'm beginning to wonder if these fanboys even actually exist on the same plane of existence that we're dealing with here. Because the people that seem to hate COD are actually the ones that piss me off, or the ones that annoy the crap out of me. It's like the exact opposite of Devil May Cry fanbase. They hate something so much that they attack people over it. Whereas, you know, DMC fans, they like something so much that they attack people over it. It's like two extremes of the same thing. I don't understand. It's dumb. And you might be saying, well, Darkness, why are you bringing this up when it comes to Titanfall? And I will answer this question. That is because among the many things that are being said about the game that are supposed complaints that aren't actually things because they don't actually complaints, which happens a lot in this situation. You know, when you haven't actually played a game, you just heard stuff, so you assume that what you hear is actually fact when it's not, is that Titanfall is just COD with mechs, which I feel the need to stress could not be further from the truth. I mean, that is literally not the case. And and in some way, I kind of get why this comparison is being brought up, because A, they're both first-person shooters, which isn't really that much of a similarity, because just because something is in the same genre doesn't mean it's the same game. If that were the case, then there wouldn't be so many bad FPSs, because if they were all the same, then we'd all be playing all of them, or, you know what I mean. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. But B, it's actually made by the same people who used to work at Infinity Ward that originally made the Modern Warfare franchise. So, that would probably tell you that, you know, oh, well, that means they're going to make it just like COD, which isn't true. Why would they do that? That makes no sense. They're not Activision. They just, you know, made Modern Warfare. And mind you, Modern Warfare was the FPS that really put COD on the map. I mean, 2 and 3 and the original were good, but Modern Warfare is what turned it into, like, this super franchise. You know, it was that good. So, we're talking about a group of developers who know what the hell they're doing when it comes to FPSs, and now they're introducing the idea of, you know, this mech combat intertwined with, you know, FPS mechanics. What's so bad about that? I don't see why people are actually actively trying to hate this idea, like, oh, it looks terrible, which I'm pretty sure you're only saying because you don't want to have fun or something. I don't actually understand. Let's just get to the fucking game, okay? You know what, I just thought of something. I think another reason why people were actively hating Titanfall is that they're a bunch of PlayStation fanboys, because Titanfall is, in fact, an Xbox One exclusive. Well, Xbox exclusive. There's also a version on the 360, and there is a version on the PC, so in case you don't have a One or a 360 for some reason, you can also get this on PC. And, you know, you enjoyed the fun. It doesn't really matter. From what I understand, all the versions are basically the same. I'm pretty sure the 360 version is obviously downscale because it's the last generation console, but moving forward, what is the game really like? Well, it is an FPS, and yes, there are mechs, but there's a lot of things you don't really know about the game without having to actually experience. For one, the complaint that this is just COD with mechs is completely unfounded because the gameplay is nothing. And I mean, nothing like COD. I mean, it is, the controls are completely fucking different. I mean, yes, it is an FPS, so obviously there are going to be similarities, but when it comes to movement, when it comes to maneuvering, it's nothing like COD. It's a lot closer to Mirror's Edge, if you can believe that, mainly because of the parkour system, the wall running, the double jumping, the climbing. It's all intertwined with the combat, and mainly the game encourages movement, and fast movement, whereas COD is a much more, I guess you could call it a more realistic experience, though it's a bit stretching it when it comes to COD. I'm just saying that, you know, with COD, you know, you can't do anything a normal human couldn't do, whereas here, you have the future cybernetic stuff that allows you to do parkour shit in the middle of combat. It makes for a much more fast-paced experience. On top of that, there are these minions in the game, which are AI characters that you actually have to shoot. It's a big way to get the score up in the game. It's not just about fighting the enemy team, it's also about destroying the enemy's army. So it's a little bit like the MOBA games you've been hearing so much about that I've been playing, like League of Legends and Dota, because there are these minions that you actually have to shoot too. In this regard, it actually discourages camping. You ever play an FPS like COD or Battlefield and you get really annoyed because there's this one motherfucker, or even 3, that are sitting in this one goddamn spot with sniper rifles and shooting you every time you walk out? Isn't that really annoying? Well, that doesn't really happen in Titanfall, because it's not a good way to get a score up. For one, camping spots are pretty limited, and if someone is doing it, they'll probably get obliterated pretty quick because, you know, Titans can't be sniped. But in addition, they won't do very well because a big chunk of your score are killing these minions. It's getting farm, essentially. It makes the game a lot more dynamic and versatile. It actively tries to discourage hated game strategies. Nobody likes a camper, and this game tries its best to make sure campers are never really a factor. And for the most part, from what I've seen, that's pretty much the case. Camping just isn't an effective strategy in Titanfall. You can do it, sure. You can do it in any game. That doesn't mean it's going to work. And this is one of those games where it just doesn't work. The combat mechanics are actually really frickin' good. I almost say they're better than Modern Warfare. It's hard to tell these days. what kind of difference is being made when it comes to the controls of these FPSs, because there's so many on the market, and the big ones are, all the same and they all feel good, but this is one of the best ones I've ever played. It just feels right. Every shot is satisfying. Every movement you make is responsive. I mean, there's not really much to complain about in the way of the controls. And if you played any other FPS, you probably know about what you're getting into. But I would say that Titanfall is even better overall, simply because of the parkour mechanics and, of course, the Titans. I haven't really mentioned the Titans yet, which is funny. You may be saying, well, why haven't you mentioned the Titans yet, Darkness? Well, that's because I just was kind of saving it for last. The Titans are a big part of the game. That's true. But the thing about them is that you don't necessarily need to use them. It's interesting. There are times where having a lot of Titans on the same screen, especially in certain game modes, is actually really, really bad. Because the thing about Titans and how large they are is that, yes, they're large, and they can withstand more damage and do more damage out, but they also take up space. And taking up space is actually a big issue with some of these narrow pathways. You have to watch out for that. On top of that, you also have to consider the fact that some of these missions are objective-based. For example, in the hardpoint game mode, where you have to capture various points and hold them for as long as possible, some of the hardpoints are inside buildings, and you can't bring Titans inside buildings. So, a lot of the times, in order to maintain hardpoints, you have to not use a Titan. It's that type of dynamic gameplay that makes Titanfall so interesting. You don't always just bring down the Titan and raise hell. That's not always a sound strategy. On top of that, you also have to consider the fact that whenever you're out of a Titan, your Titan is also not useless then, because there are certain commands you can issue your Titan's AI while you are not piloting it, namely follow and guard. Which, I understand sounds pretty limited, but it's at least interesting to know that you can control what your Titan is doing without you actually being in the Titan. You could be halfway across the frickin' map and your Titan is guarding a hardpoint on the other side, and probably doing a bang-up job because the AI is actually a pretty damn good shot. Which admittedly is really annoying when the enemy's trying to take out a Titan, but hey, it's a thing that you can do, and that's kinda cool actually. Now you might be saying, well, what do you mean? Well, what if the enemy has a lot of Titans and just destroys you? You can't fight Titans without Titans, right? No. Also not true, because every single pilot is equipped with an anti-Titan weapon, which is something that the game developers thought of because they're not idiots. Basically, you have two different weapons like you would in normal FPSs, but you also have an alternative anti-Titan weapon, a weapon specifically designed to do heavy damage to Titans. There are various different ones, obviously. It's because of this, even if you don't actually have a Titan yourself for whatever reason, yours was destroyed or you haven't been able to call yours down yet, whatever the case, you can still put up a fight against Titans and not get destroyed. On top of that, you have to consider the fact that, again, Titans are very large, whereas you, as a pilot, are much more mobile from a parkour standpoint and much faster. It's a lot more difficult to take out an individual pilot in a Titan than it is to fight another Titan. So you also have to consider that factor. All this culminates in one of the most interesting and busy multiplayer games I've ever played in my life. It is actually that good. This is some of the best multiplayer you could possibly find on any console these days, and I can't stress that enough. However, with every good game, there is always bad things. Bad things coming in to ruin the experience. And even though I've been against the haters when it comes to this game, there are things that are wrong with it. First of all, one of the complaints I've been hearing is that it's multiplayer only, and I don't really consider that a huge complaint because TF2 is multiplayer only, and people love that game, and I'm well aware that game's free to play nowadays, but it didn't used to be. What's wrong with having a multiplayer only experience? A lot of games do that. It's not like that's something unique to Titanfall. Admittedly, I personally would have liked a single-player experience to be in this game, simply because the world they created to explain the Titans and everything about them is so interesting, and you could have written something really cool to do with this. But they just didn't. According to the developers, though, they said they had a working single-player mode during development, but decided it was a lot better to focus on an outstanding multiplayer game than to deliver a lackluster single-player experience, which I can understand in a way, so I can't really blame them for that. And so multiplayer is really good, so I can't complain too much. Moving forward, there is a campaign mode, which is multiplayer, which I know that sounds really confusing, multiplayer campaign, but that could be really interesting. You could have, different matches and different matchups, and you could do it with other people online, and, you could have branching storylines, and, all that sounds really cool, I bet. Except none of that's in here. Okay, listen, my issue with the campaign in Titanfall is that it's not really a thing. at all. It barely exists on its own, in that there's really no difference between it and the regular multiplayer. The only difference is that every single matchup is scripted, in that you know what game type it's going to be and what map it's going to be on. Other than that, the actual game types you experience in the campaign are no different from the ones that you would get in the regular multiplayer experience. On top of that, the plot isn't fleshed out enough to be interesting, yet at the same time it is interesting enough to frustrate you that it's not being fleshed out enough, which is an interesting accomplishment, by the way. On top of that, there's no real negative effects when it comes to the campaign if you lose. Like, if you're on the losing side, it doesn't affect the campaign at all. You still progress as normal, whether you won or lost. So there's literally no point to experiencing the campaign other than to experience the story that was not fleshed out enough to be interesting. Except for one thing. In order to unlock the other Titan models, you have to beat the campaign. Which is actually a little sneaky, and if it weren't for that, I probably wouldn't have bothered with the campaign at all. So that's kind of a bad thing. I mean, yeah, you might be saying, well, you know, if it's just the campaign is the same as the multiplayer, you know, is it really that much of a waste of time? I mean, you're still experiencing the same game, essentially, and yeah, but my issue with this is that why is it even a different game mode at all if it's not going to do anything unique with it? You could have done a lot with this. You really could have. And from what I understand, Brink, a game that was almost universally hated by, like, everyone, did a better job at this sort of multiplayer campaign experience than Titanfall does. Which is just disgusting to say. But I just, you know, wish there was more here. I mean, if you're gonna do this, at least do it right. And unfortunately, when it comes to the campaign, it's not really that interesting. Not to say that the rest of the game isn't. The rest of the game is great. But the campaign is full of the bad spots. I have another complaint. This is going to be an interesting one, and this is coming from someone who's played both COD and Battlefield. One of the big similarities between those two games is that there's a lot of customization when it comes to your, you know, soldiers in either of those games. I mean, Battlefield, you have a class system, and multiple vehicles to customize, and things like that. COD, you don't have so much of a class system, but you have a lot of different weapons to use. You have different perks and stuff like that. Now, things like perks and customizing your Titan and stuff are in Titanfall, and it's totally there and it exists. My issue with the customization in Titanfall is that at first it's going to feel like there's a lot there. There is not a lot there. And that's what my big issue. For a game that's so good from a multiplayer perspective, this is actually pretty disappointing. There just isn't enough depth to the customization of the game, and to the point that I feel like people are going to get bored of this game way quicker than they should. Simply because there aren't that many options. I mean, there's like 10 different weapons in the game, like, total, when it comes to primaries. 3 different pistols for secondaries, which is pretty lackluster if you ask me. Titans have like 5 different primary weapons, and like when it comes to the perks, I mean there are 2 different perk slots with like 3 different perks for each slot, but that's only 6 different perks. I mean, we're talking about a game that could have had a lot of depth to it. I mean, but it's not. There's just not that much there when it comes to depth. I mean, there are only 3 different types of Titan models. The most interesting aspect of the game has only 3 different types. 3. And the problem is the 3 that are there are like the most generic kind of 3 you could possibly find. You have your, your basic Atlas, which is just, you know, an all-around good Titan. You have the Strider, I think it's called, that's really fast, but, you know, doesn't take much damage. And you have the frickin' Ogre, which is really slow, but can take a lot of damage. And that's it. I mean, that's kind of shitty, to be honest. And it'd be one thing if there were only 10 weapons and they were all really, really interesting, but they're not. Because other than the Smart Pistol, which admittedly is really cool and I use it all the time, the other weapons are the same kind of weapons you'd expect to find in any kind of FPS. There's a machine gun, there's a shotgun, there's a sniper rifle. Except that they're here to save the future, and not the present.
For the future.
But because of this, I'm afraid people are going to get too bored of the game. And yes, there are other things about the customization that change the game up a little bit, like the burn cards. The burn cards are a little interesting. Basically, they're perks, except they're one-time use only. You can take 3 of them into each match. And don't worry about wasting them, because you're going to get a fucking ton of these by the time you're done. I mean, I have way too many. I can't use them fast enough, so don't worry about that. I mean, the burn cards are actually pretty interesting because they offer different things. You can get your Titan faster, you can get advanced versions of weapons that you wouldn't normally be able to use. There's risk involved since they're one-time use, and if you get shot, you're done. I mean, you can't use them again, but hey, it's an interesting feature, kind of unique, never seen that before, that's cool, but the thing about Titanfall is that the multiplayer is so good that I wish there was more to it. There's only like 4 different game modes on top of that. I mean, we're talking about a really outstanding experience from a gameplay perspective. The core game is really good, but there's not enough depth to it. There's not enough variation. There's not enough options when it comes to the game modes, when it comes to the customization, to the point that I feel like the game is going to get stale way quicker than it should, which is unfortunate because I can tell that a lot of work went into this game. It's really unique, and it's really fun, and it's not just COD with mechs, I can't stress that enough. But if there isn't enough customization there, people aren't going to stay. That's a big deal, especially when you compare it to especially like Battlefield 4, which is a game I've been playing on stream recently. That game has a ton, hundreds of different options, whether it comes to the vehicles, whether it comes to the weapons, whether it comes to different classes. I mean, we're talking about a game with so many different options, and if you compare that to Titanfall, even comparing Titanfall to COD has over 50, probably hundreds of different weapons by now. I mean, the options in COD are pretty varied. But when it comes to Titanfall, they're not nearly even close to as varied as those two games, and I don't understand why. I would have thought there would have been more when it came to that. Still, despite my complaints, Titanfall is a really good game, and I still highly recommend it. I do. It's a lot of fun. And I think a lot of people, you know, if they give it a chance, could have a lot of fun with the game. I just feel that there should be more to it. That is all I'm saying. Granted, DLC is always a thing, but then we would have to pay for that DLC, which means we'd be paying extra for things I feel should have been there in the first place. So isn't that kind of a fix-it game? Not really, but, I don't know. I mean, you know, if the DLC is worth it, like with a lot of different options and new maps and stuff, well, actually, there's a lot of maps in the game already, so I guess a map pack really would be the last thing we need at this point. What we need are new perks, what we need are new Titan models, what we need are more customization options. If we get that, then Titanfall can be even better, and its longevity will increase, and I think people are really going to like this. So if you haven't given it a try, at the very least give the demo a shot or something, if you can. And, you know, just stop hating on everyone else's fun train. I mean, that's kind of rude when you think about it. Just throw it out there. I'm trying to stop, because I've done it before, and I'd like to quit doing that at this time. So, until next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.